My name is Emily, and now I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me in the year 2019 in the bustling city of Detroit. I am a freelance graphic designer, always on the lookout for new opportunities to expand my client base and take on exciting projects. Little did I know that a seemingly innocent quest for work would plunge me into the heart of a chilling mystery that gripped the entire city. It was a typical day, with the sun casting its golden rays over the urban landscape as I sat in front of my computer, scouring various websites for potential job listings. As I scrolled through Craigslist, a platform I often use to find freelance gigs, a particular ad caught my eye. It offered a well-paying graphic design project with flexible hours, an offer too good to pass up. Eager to learn more, I clicked on the ad and sent a message expressing my interest. Within hours, I received a response from the alleged employer, who introduced himself as David. He seemed professional and courteous in his emails, outlining the project details and suggesting we meet in person to discuss further. Despite a faint sense of unease lingering in the back of my mind, I brushed it off as mere jitters and agreed to the meeting. That evening, I found myself navigating through the maze-like streets of Detroit, heading towards the designated meeting spot, a quiet cafe tucked away in a secluded corner of the city. As I entered the dimly lit establishment, I spotted a man sitting alone at a corner table, his face partially obscured by the shadows. Assuming it was David, I approached him with a polite smile. "Emily, I presume." He greeted me, his voice smooth and confident. "Yes, that's me," I replied, taking a seat opposite him. That evening at the cafe, as David and I delved deeper into discussions about the project, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. At first, everything seemed normal. His demeanor was friendly, his tone professional. But then, almost imperceptibly, his demeanor shifted. It was subtle, but I noticed it. A flicker of something dark behind his eyes, a chill in his voice that hadn't been there before. His smile seemed forced, his laughter hollow. It was as if a mask had slipped, revealing the true nature lurking beneath. As he spoke, I felt a sense of unease creeping over me, like a shadow descending upon the room. His words took on a sinister edge, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave. But I pushed aside my misgivings, chalking them up to paranoia. Yet, as the conversation continued, the feeling of discomfort only grew stronger. It was as if David was probing, searching for something beyond the surface of our discussion. His questions became more probing, more intrusive, and I found myself growing increasingly on edge. Finally, unable to ignore the nagging sense of unease any longer, I made an excuse to leave, citing another appointment that I needed to attend to urgently. David's response was polite enough, but I could sense the disappointment lurking beneath his facade. It was almost as if he had expected me to stay, to fall into whatever trap he had laid. Hurrying out of the cafe, I breathed a sigh of relief as the cool night air washed over me. But even as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the pit of my stomach. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over me, casting a shadow on everything around me. That night, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. The image of David's cold gaze haunted my thoughts, his words echoing in my mind like a sinister refrain. Try as I might, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something far more sinister than a simple business meeting. Hours passed, but the sense of unease only intensified. It was as if the darkness that had enveloped David had seeped into my own consciousness, twisting and turning until I was consumed by it. I started thinking it might have something to do with the missing girls. Maybe I was just overreacting, so I tried to push it aside right away. Days passed, and I buried myself in work, trying to push aside the unsettling memories of that meeting. However, the tranquility of my routine was shattered when news broke out about a series of murders targeting young women who had responded to job ads on Craigslist. The city was plunged into a state of fear and paranoia as the body count continued to rise. The parallels between the victims and the ad I had responded to sent chills down my spine. Had I narrowly escaped a similar fate? The thought haunted me, driving me to collaborate with law enforcement in any way I could. I shared every detail of my encounter with David, hoping it would aid in their investigation. As weeks turned into months, the city remained on edge, with the killer lurking in the shadows, preying on unsuspecting victims. The police worked tirelessly, combing through evidence and following every lead in their pursuit of justice. Despite their efforts, the killer remained elusive, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. It wasn't until a breakthrough in the case, a crucial piece of evidence that linked the murders to a single suspect, that the tide began to turn. With renewed determination, law enforcement launched a coordinated effort to apprehend the perpetrator and bring him to justice. The final showdown came a dramatic confrontation that played out on the streets of Detroit. After a tense standoff, the police finally cornered the suspect, who was revealed to be none other than David, the same man I had met in the cafe that fateful day. The revelation sent shockwaves through the city, as the true extent of David's depravity came to light. He was not the charming employer he pretended to be, but a ruthless killer who had preyed on the vulnerability of his victims. As he was led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and horror, knowing that I had narrowly escaped the clutches of a cold-blooded murderer. In the aftermath of the ordeal, I found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. The scars of that experience would linger long after the headlines faded. It was a sobering reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows, hidden behind a facade of normalcy. But through it all, I emerged stronger and more vigilant, determined never to let my guard down again in a city where danger could lurk around any corner. My name is Ethan, and now I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me in the year 2017 in the bustling city of Los Angeles, California. I'm a regular guy, much like anyone else, always on the lookout for a good deal. Little did I know that my quest for a bargain would lead me down a path fraught with danger and deception. It was a typical day in La, the sun beating down relentlessly on the crowded streets as I scrolled through my phone, browsing through the endless listings on Craigslist. Among the myriad of ads, one caught my eye. A cell phone for sale at a price that seemed too good to be true. The allure of a bargain was irresistible, and without much thought, I clicked on the ad to learn more. The phone appeared to be in pristine condition, boasting features that surpassed those of my current device. Excitement bubbled within me as I imagined the possibilities that owning such a phone would bring. Eager to seal the deal, I reached out to the seller, hoping to arrange a meeting as soon as possible. We exchanged a few messages, and soon enough, a meeting was set at a local coffee shop. As I made my way there, I couldn't shake off the feeling of anticipation mingled with a hint of apprehension. After all, meeting a stranger from the internet always came with its risks. The promise of a great deal overshadowed any lingering doubts. Upon arriving at the designated meeting spot, I scanned the crowd, searching for someone who fit the description the seller had given me. Spotting a figure waving me over, I approached with cautious optimism, ready to finalize the transaction and walk away with my new purchase. However, as I drew closer, a sense of unease crept over me. Something didn't feel right, but before I could react, it was too late. The person who had beckoned me over was not the seller I had expected, but rather a group of menacing individuals, their intentions masked behind false smiles and friendly gestures. In an instant, the situation escalated from a simple transaction to a nightmare scenario. I found myself surrounded, their words laced with malice as they demanded my belongings. Fear gripped me as I realized the gravity of the situation. I had walked straight into a trap, orchestrated by criminals preying on unsuspecting victims like myself. In a desperate bid to escape, I tried to reason with them, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. Violence erupted, and before I could react, I was overwhelmed by a flurry of blows. Pain seared through my body as I fought to defend myself. Against their sheer numbers, I stood little chance. The next moments were a blur of chaos and confusion, the sounds of scuffling and shouting echoing in my ears. Through the haze, I caught glimpses of faces contorted with rage, their hands reaching for my possessions with ruthless intent. In that moment, I feared for my life, unsure if I would ever make it out alive. As the ordeal dragged on, I felt my strength waning, each blow sapping away a little more of my resolve. The criminals were obviously aghast that I had taken so little money and valuables with me. One of them kept hitting me in the face, and I could feel the skin in some places split open and blood running all over my face. If I continued to lie there, I would surely die. But something happened. I wondered if I could die so stupidly. By some petty thieves. In a last attempt to save myself, I gathered all my strength. I could not see much, but a little oriented in space, I hit the man who was hitting me in the area of the temple. Probably because of the adrenaline, the blow turned out to be strong, although I had no strength. In a second, I realized everything. Although a minute ago, I was lying almost unconscious. Now, I jumped up and ran. I don't remember how long I ran, but I remember that I was very short of oxygen and my eyes were dark. I got to a less crowded place. As soon as I realized that there was no more danger, my temples were pierced with pain and darkness fell. I woke up in the hospital a couple days later. It was only then that I realized the true extent of the danger I had narrowly escaped. A brush with death that served as a stark reminder of the risks lurking in the shadows of the digital world. In my pursuit of a bargain, I had unwittingly placed myself in harm's way, a cautionary tale of the perils of online shopping gone awry. When I came to my senses, I vowed never to let my guard down again, to heed the warnings and stay vigilant against the predators lurking in the depths of cyberspace. For in the dark underbelly of the internet, where anonymity reigns supreme, lies a world fraught with danger, where the promise of a bargain can quickly turn into a fight for survival. And though I emerged bruised and battered, I emerged stronger, armed with the knowledge that in the face of adversity, resilience is our greatest weapon. After a couple hours, it seemed to me, because time dragged on for a long time, the police arrived. I recounted the events of that fateful day to the officers, providing them with as much detail as I could remember. The faces of the criminals, the location of the encounter, anything that could help them track down the perpetrators and bring them to justice. With steady determination, the officers sprang into action, launching a full-scale investigation into the incident, determined to unravel the tangled web of deceit that had ensnared me. As days turned into weeks, I waited anxiously for news of any developments in the case, my thoughts consumed by the looming spectre of the criminals who had so callously robbed me of my sense of security. But then a breakthrough came, a lead that would ultimately lead to the apprehension of the perpetrators and bring closure to the nightmare that had plagued me for so long. Through meticulous detective work and collaboration with other law enforcement agencies, the police were able to identify the individuals responsible for orchestrating the elaborate scheme that had nearly cost me my life. They were no ordinary criminals, but rather seasoned con artists who had perfected the art of deception, preying on unsuspecting victims with ruthless efficiency. Armed with this newfound knowledge, the police launched a coordinated raid on the criminals' hideout, apprehending them before they could inflict any more harm upon innocent civilians. Justice was served, and the perpetrators were brought to trial, facing the full weight of the law for their heinous crimes. In the end, I emerged not only as a survivor, but as a victor. The perpetrators were imprisoned for many years. I could sigh, for this terrible story of my life had come to an end. My name is Daniel, and now I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me in 2019 in the bustling city of New York. I am just an average guy living in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, trying to make ends meet in the chaos of the city. My home is a small but cozy one-bedroom apartment tucked away in a quiet corner of the neighborhood. It's nothing fancy, but it's my sanctuary from the hustle and bustle of the city streets. The walls are adorned with posters of my favorite bands and movies, giving the place a touch of personality. The living room doubles as my workspace, cluttered with books, papers, and my trusty laptop, where I spend most of my time working as a freelance writer. life in the city can be both exhilarating and exhausting. Days blur into nights as the city never sleeps, and I find myself caught up in the constant rhythm of urban life. But amidst the chaos, there's a sense of freedom and possibility that keeps me going. One fateful day, while browsing through Craigslist for some second-hand furniture to furnish my apartment, I stumbled upon an ad for a vintage desk that caught my eye. The pictures looked promising, and the price seemed too good to pass up. Without giving it much thought, I decided to reach out to the seller and arranged to meet up later that evening. As I made my way to the designated meeting spot, a sense of anticipation bubbled within me. Little did I know that this seemingly innocent transaction would soon plunge me into a nightmare beyond my wildest imagination. The meeting place was a dimly lit alleyway tucked away from the main street. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a pang of unease gnawing at the pit of my stomach. But the allure of the vintage desk was too strong to ignore, so I pushed aside my doubts and pressed on. As I approached the alley, I noticed a figure lurking in the shadows, watching me intently. A chill ran down my spine as a wave of apprehension washed over me. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, ready to dial for help if things took a turn for the worse. "Are you Daniel?" A voice called out from the darkness, starting me out of my reverie. I turned to see a man stepping out from the shadows, his face obscured by the dim light. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, trying to mask the nervousness in my voice. The man nodded, gesturing for me to follow him deeper into the alley. With a sense of trepidation, I trailed behind him, my senses on high alert. We reached a rundown building at the end of the alley, its windows boarded up and graffiti covering the walls. Alarm bells started ringing in my head as I realized that something was seriously wrong. But before I could react, I was grabbed by the arms and dragged into the building by force by several men, who tried to hide their faces just in case, so I could only see a few of them. Not particularly well-groomed faces, with 2 week-old shields, their heads hidden in hoods. There were about 5 or 6 people in the building in total, a couple of whom were dragging me towards the others. It was then that I realized that my business was very bad. Abruptly, I headbutted one of the men. His grip loosened, and I managed to break free. As I ran, I could hear their leader most likely yelling at them to catch up with me, or they would be in big trouble. After running about 15 meters, my leg was very painful, as if a hot rebar had pierced it through. It was a bullet that had shot me in the leg so that I couldn't run any further. The pain was very strong, but even stronger was the fear of realizing that I could not save myself and that I had little to depend on. A man came up to me with a bat and hit me in the head with a swing. Darkness. I sometimes came to my senses. There was noise, shouting I wanted to sleep. My eyes rolled back and I lost consciousness again. I finally woke up in a truck. My leg was bandaged. I was not bleeding. But I had a headache, as if my skull had been fractured. What I didn't immediately notice was the presence of other people in the trailer. The perpetrators had loaded me and several other frightened victims into the back of a large truck, intending to take us across the border to some unknown destination. There were women and men of various ages, ranging from about 15 to 35. Everyone was silent, and when I tried to get out and call for help, I was quickly told to shut up, because if I made any noise, these people would come and take some of them away. That's what happened to the girl who was never seen again. I seemed to accept my fate. I didn't know where they were taking me and why, but it was something obviously dangerous for my life. Hours passed like an eternity, while I languished in captivity, my mind reeling with fear and uncertainty. But in the midst of the darkness, a glimmer of hope flickered in me. As fate would have it, their plans were shattered in a most unexpected way. As the truck rumbled down the deserted roads, its headlights piercing the darkness like beacons of despair, a vigilant patrol car appeared on the scene. The officers, sharp-eyed and alert, immediately recognized the suspicious vehicle and rushed into action. Flashing its headlights and howling its sirens, the patrol car rolled after the truck, determined and purposeful. The criminals, realizing they had been spotted, started the engine and sped off into the night. desperate to evade pursuit at any cost. The high-speed chase began, the patrol car following the fleeing truck. The streets whizzed by in a dizzying whirlwind of traffic as the two cars raced through the city, recklessly cutting into the flow of traffic. But despite their best efforts, the criminals could not resist the relentless pursuit of law enforcement. As the distance between the patrol car and the truck grew smaller and smaller with each passing moment, the police began firing at the tires. Eventually, the truck came to a rumbling halt. It could no longer continue driving. Surrounded on all sides by a phalanx of police cars, the criminals had no choice but to surrender. With guns at the ready and commanding voices, the police quickly moved in to apprehend the criminals and ensure the safety of the hostages inside the truck. As I sat shivering in the darkness, shouts and commotion were heard outside, signifying the end of our ordeal. A sense of relief and gratitude swept over me like a tidal wave, and I realized that thanks to the timely intervention of law enforcement, we had been rescued from the criminals. After the dramatic rescue, the criminals were quickly taken into custody, their nefarious plans thwarted thanks to the bravery and tenacity of the police officers. And as I escaped into the cool night air, my lungs burning with exertion, I realized that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. I realized that I was finally free. The events of that agonizing night would stay with me forever, a vivid reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows of the city.